when it comes to marriage and the expectations that are set on men, Black South African men, and what it would take for them to be effective in a marriage, I think the standards or the bar is set very low. And as I did in my previous video, I am drawing from what I've seen in the show, Married at First Sight. These 4 men were selected from hundreds of applications. People write in, submit profiles. There are rigorous interviews. They make them reflect on their past experiences, relationship experiences, and they do like background checks, and these are thorough. And granted, which as expected, there are more women who apply to the show than men. So if more of the men did actually apply, maybe we could have had a better sample than what ended up on our screens, especially in this season. And I think the fact that very few men are applying for the show, I think it has very little to do with this. I saw one comment from my comment section saying, once a man gets successful, he starts looking for a wife. And once a woman gets successful, well, you can see from the video. And my response to that was like, they're not getting married. South African men are not getting married. That's the thing. And it's either many of them are choosing to get married later in life, or they don't get married at all because of the sudden pool of women or options that becomes available to them. And they've struggled to choose. They struggle to settle down on one woman. Hence, like I said in last week's video, there's this resurgence of polygamy and how African it is for men to want polygamy because they've got the money, they can afford to. And half of them, mind you, can't really afford to do the polygamy thing anyways. So you find that they stumble upon a little bit of money and they don't want to get married. They want to explore their options as much as possible, marry later, some of them, and marry younger, right? So that's the thing. And this is not something like that I'm sucking out of my thumb. Just Google the stats. South Africa has noticeably low marriage rates compared to the rest of the world. People are either getting married, like the average median age of marriage for women and men is much older than it was before. The divorce rates have gone up, etc. So those are real stats and they are available for us to see on the internet. So part of maybe the problem is women like me. And I don't know if it's a problem, but part of the problem is women like me who come into their own, get successful, get educated, and realize maybe somewhere along the way that actually maybe, this is not the thing. It's positive, it's good, for the growth of African families, etc. But the incentive or it doesn't seem like a very promising investment. So yes, we could do with a better sample of people that are applying to the show, right? But this is unfortunately the selection that we have to contend with. And it's not just with the men. I am discovering more and more as the show continues that the women also have their own, mishaps and challenges. But I'm a woman who stands to marry a man. And for now, I want to focus on the men, if that's okay with you. And these men that have been chosen, in as much as they are, not the best possible that could have been chosen, they do reflect what is happening in society. This bunch of men are a bunch of men that are running these streets and going around as if they're the prize. And women, are pining over and fighting for and letting go of their standards just, to call themselves married. Honestly, I don't blame them for it. Because for a long time in my 20s, I also believed that the one thing that makes a man a man is the amount of money that he has, right? That as long as he appeared to have enough of it, and I say appeared because once you run into enough of them, you realize that they actually don't have that much financial stability. They actually don't really understand how to build wealth in terms of, investments and savings. They really are concerned with getting into as much money as possible, as quickly as possible, and then buying all of these things that could, become the symbols of wealth that they don't actually have, right? And they know that then young, impressionable women, as young and impressionable as I was in my 20s, will be flocking towards them because that is what makes them valuable in society. So I realized very quickly how financially irresponsible many of them are. There's nowhere else that they can take you for a good time except for a restaurant and a club, I should say. And it meant that they were so cool, that they were so interesting, and as a result, capable of marriage. And don't get me started on how utterly uninteresting many of them are in terms of thinking, critical thinking, conversation. It's just so empty, guys. I don't know how to explain it. Forget the big stomach or the questionable personal hygiene. So what I quickly learned, I think, running around these spaces is that money on its own is not the important thing. There needs to be character that comes with the money. There needs to be a sense of what the person had, skills that the person has built, for themselves, the character that they've built for themselves in order to be able to make that money, to be in a position to make that money. And yes, in a South African context, most of the time, the really super rich men that you find, didn't really have to go about it in the most ethical way, right? But they are, and please don't get me wrong, there are men who are working hard, who are doing good, who are building themselves up, and those are the men that I'm interested in. But you do find that with this lavish display of a wealthy lifestyle, of this kind of conspicuous spending, right, that these men come into the money in ways that don't really build their character, in ways that don't enrich them, their sense of being, personhood, in a real way, in terms of morally and yeah, I don't know, having principles, right, that would separate them from the boys. It's almost as if they couldn't wait to have the money so that they can become the boys, the immature player, promiscuous, and again, polygamous boys that they are turning out to be more and more. And it's like those then become the people that we or society deems to be respectable and, manly. And don't get me wrong, the money is important. The money is important because I also have the money. And I've created a specific kind of life that I don't think is one that I should be expected to sacrifice or dumb down just in the name of love, right? Because I'm in love with somebody else, or because there's the prospect of getting married to someone. And you may call it shallow, but there's plenty of women who I think are willing to do that, to accept that, who are desperate for that kind of, being chosen and whatever, and can give it all up for the opportunity to get chosen. I'm just not one of them. Anyways, if you watch the show, then you probably know the one beaming example of these kinds of men that we find in our society. If you don't, then just a quick summary. There's 3 of them. Well, the one is is not necessarily moneyed. He is, trying to play a Christian man who has found God and wants to lead his wife into this Christian utopian family situation. And he's on a completely different show along with the person he's partnered with, who is Makoto. So his name is Nkulego. And both of them are actors, I hear. And so it seems as if both of them are really, they're on another show. They're doing something completely different to what is happening here. But I'll touch on them a bit later on. But there's three of them who portray this image of the, wealthy, highly coveted, South African black man. And the other two of them haven't really annoyed me much for the last two episodes, so episode 8 and 9. But I think there's one, Tshepo, who deserves an honorable mention because, wow. In episode 8, we see Tshepo acting out because there was apparently a situation where he was having a disagreement with the person he was partnered with. Her name is Balesa. She went to the mall, I think, and was going to get some groceries. So he apparently always Ubers her or gives her his car, and she will also use his car to do the shopping and stuff like that. And apparently during the process of him requesting for a car for her and stuff, her phone died. So she said she had to go and get the phone charged and stuff like that. And Tshepo apparently got angry, and he decided to start giving her silent treatment or something of the sort. And I think he proceeds to stay out until the early hours of the morning. Something about a work function he was going to that went up till late, until 2 a.m. when he comes back and is knocking violently on Palesa's door. We see a video. So Palesa actually records a video of him banging on the door, back home, drunk, late at night. That scene on itself, right? If there's no shame in you behaving that way as a man on live television, I can only imagine how further violent that scene could be or could have been if there weren't any cameras, right? Keep in mind that in South Africa, we have the highest rates of gender-based violence, and more often than not, a woman does not feel safe in her own home because of such behavior. So Palesa refuses to open the door for her, and obviously he says he then went to his mother's house, his home, I think in the Val or something, but also in another confessional, he says he slept in the car. But nonetheless, he comes back into the house. The first thing he wants to do is take a shower. I don't know how he went to his mother's house and not been able to shower. He comes back and he finds Palesa having a chat with, I think it was Portia or Makoto, I can't remember. But he then proceeds to stand with Palesa on the balcony and has an almost like a very cringe, awkward stare off contest. It's like waiting for Palesa to say something, waiting for Palesa to be the one who starts the conversation, right? He's the one who came home in the wee hours of the morning to knock violently on Palesa's door, and she didn't open for him. And then he now comes back into the house and expects Palesa to be the one who starts the conversation about why he did that. So strange. But because he has elevated himself above her, because he's given her these financial, he's doing these financial favors for her, she's the one who's supposed to ensure that she keeps the emotional safety and stability of the relationship intact. He is completely absolved from that responsibility because he has got the financial assets to contribute. And not to say Palisa doesn't have her own financial assets. She is a working woman. And, if the financial arrangement was that she could use his car and she could use his card for daily expenses, then what gives him the right to do that? What gives him the right to now use those things as leverage as to why Palisa is supposed to be the one doing all the emotional labor in the relationship, right? And we learn later on in the show, I think this is now episode 9, that actually he has now taken away the car and taken away the bank card. So when the question arises in this confessional game that they are playing, they went to Mount Grace for like a couples retreat and stuff. So when the question arises as to whether Palisa feels like Tshepo is abusing her or not, Palisa proceeds to cry hysterically. And it seems as though Tshepo is somehow abusing her, right? This is obviously not something that we've seen on camera in terms of like an actual altercation where we could call it violence. But, and this is so important, what ends up landing on our screens, and this goes for abusive relationships in general, what ends up landing in social circles amongst friends is only an iota of the actual abuse that actually takes place in the actual relationship, right? And I'm not saying that Tshepo is abusive, but the fact that he took away that card and the fact that he took the car away from her because he was not happy with her behavior says a lot about the kind of man he actually is in reality. The fact that he comes back home at that time of the hour, has no care in the world for the neighbors, and begins to bang at Palisa's door, not thinking of whether this could scare her away, whether, this could mean anything about him and his character or his temperament. And maybe he shouldn't be doing that and maybe try to call her instead. He doesn't think of that. No, he wants to bang on the door and show the world that this woman doesn't want to open for me when I'm coming home at 2 a.m. in the morning. So there's that. Coming home and doing that whole thing that he does at the balcony with Palisa is showing that there's just zero emotional intelligence. There's zero accountability taken from his side. He then continues to give her the silent treatment, and they actually go to the vacation or couples retreat and are staying in separate bedrooms. And then comes the question about the abuse at the table. And if that's not, enough signs or signals about Tshepo being problematic, he did call Umakoto a hoe. He did it in the group setting while they were talking as the husbands, and Makoto's husband, Nkululeko, was actually there. Okay, this is editing me. Apparently he didn't say the words exactly, but he did make reference to a song that referred to not being able to turn bitches into wives or something like that. I don't know, but it was implied. And yeah, Nkululeko is also, for some reason, idolizing Tshepo. He struggles to stand up for Umakoto in response to that. And there starts this kind of tension and combativeness between Makoto and Nkululeko. They were always fighting. They were always, not really getting along because they were not really into each other. And I should say that Nkululeko is not really into Makoto because, he wants this kind of submissive, Christian-like, very calm, down-to-earth type woman and Makoto. And I think maybe also he's not really attracted to her aesthetically because, again, there were sexual issues there happening. But it seems as if this became the actual tipping point for Umakoto, because her chat is that you couldn't defend me from your friend who was calling me names, who was degrading me to the lowest point. I mean, you married to me and you're allowing another man to actually do that, call me names, call me a hoe, and you don't say anything about it. And actually, the episode 9, we hear Nkululeko actually saying that I went after him, I went and told him that you don't like it. And Makoto's argument is, but how did it make you feel, right, as my husband? Why are you going there as if you're some kind of mouthpiece between me and Tsepo, when you should also be expressing your unhappiness with what Tsepo has said and actually standing up for your wife and your family? But he's not doing that. He's going there as some sort of ice boy for Tsepo, because that's what he is. That's what he's acting to be. And yeah, I think Makoto's switch has just flipped, and right now she's at a point where she doesn't want to hear nothing from anyone, and she's just ruining everything for everyone else in terms of the ladies that are there, and it's just a whole mess. And it's like, how do you expect her to react? How do you expect her to stand up for herself when no one else was there to stand up for her? So Makoto is losing her shit in the truth box game. That was episode 9. She's loud, she's abrasive, she's crass, she's multiplying that language and those remarks that were passed on to her, and she's actually going in the opposite direction that I think these men were expecting her to go. She's not reacting in a very feminine way, in the most soft way. I think they were expecting her to maybe go cry in her little corner and feel ashamed of herself for being called a hoe, meaning that she must be a hoe because maybe her behavior. So let her now act small and insignificant so that these men can change their minds about her, and maybe they can start complimenting her and getting their approval. But Makoto is not doing that. Makoto has decided that she's going to give them that which was called and multiply it 1,000 times. And unfortunately, it's now coming across as though she's the problem. And perhaps she is. I don't want to have that chat right now. I'm having the chat that as a society, it's like we've normalized this thing of punishing women for being loud, for being present, for being out there, for appearing to be strong and masculine. We want to punish them. Men want to punish us for being like that by calling us these names and just try to put us back in our place, put us back in our box. And obviously, what was Tsepo's intention for saying that? Nkululeko must now go back home and start doubting himself and doubting his marriage because other men out there think of his wife like that, right? And most of these things that men do is to appease their friends and to have this kind of street cred or reputation, right? To say, my woman is sweet and soft and feminine. They don't care about that. They don't care about that bullshit. They just want to be able to walk around in society and say, I've got control over my woman. I can, get my woman to submit. Look at how well she's behaved. Just imagine how she is in private because I get to tell her exactly what I want her to do and she does it. That's what they want. So Makoto is kind of, going against that image, that, expectation. And so Tsepo, or men like Tsepo, feel the need to kind of put women like Makoto in their place. And this is the reaction, unfortunately. If Makoto has her own issues to deal with, I think she does have her own issues to deal with regarding, how she's now acting towards the other women in the show, revealing, things that Portia said, for instance, about Bongani, things like that. I don't think that's very nice of her. I don't think that should happen at all, just because, she's in this situation. But also, these women were not defending her either in that truth table. It's like she was there by herself, having to stand up for herself, for being called something that, again, is meant to box her back into her place as a woman. And the other women just keep quiet. Why? Because it wasn't said to them. So why should they be involved? Why should they say anything? But then again, women are generally taught to wait. Wait until the man changes his mind about you. Wait until he chooses you, right? So that could be one of the reasons maybe that Makoto is still in this experience. But it's clear that Nkulego is not into her. And it's sad that she didn't really get to go into this experience. And maybe the same personality would have been exposed, but maybe also we would have gotten the part of her that feels seen and appreciated by the men that she is matched with on the show. Anyways, like I said at the beginning of this, I don't really want to talk about the other two as much, which is Themba and Bongani, because I think the drama from that side is a little bit calmer, but they too represent a similar archetype that Tshepo is expressing in the most extreme sense of it. There's got to be more, right? There's got to be more than what we're seeing on these televisions. And there is. I know that there is. And having changed my perspective on what I find to be valuable in a man, or most valuable in a man, because the money is still important, but not the most important. So having changed that perspective, and now that I'm starting to look for something different, I am actually seeing something different. There's more evidence of the fact that this does exist in society, and it's refreshing. It's good, right? But there's still an overwhelming majority that believe that this is a good way of presenting yourself as a man in the world. And unfortunately, there's still so many women that are willing to take that, and then that becomes the standard. And even though it might be easier to say, okay, then cast your net outside of the dating, the black men pool, and maybe you'll find something in other races and all of that. The reason I haven't done that, firstly, is because I'm a historian, and understanding the history of this country and the racial dynamics, still experiencing racism and microaggressions from white people in general. And there's very few white people I can think about at the top of my head who I'd say truly see me for my humanness. I think I'd struggle very much with establishing a romantic relationship with a white man. And I find that people who grew up in the township, or maybe in close proximity to township life, went to university and experienced campus life, there's a certain level of like street smartness and charisma, or you develop this kind of multi-dimensional and liberal view of the world that you just wouldn't get if you were sheltered in a very like perfect, prim and proper, financially stable white home. And, you don't get to interact with other groups of people. So that's also something that, I don't think is the answer for, but definitely the likes of those ones that we are seeing on Married at First Sight right now, they have their own market, but I'm not part of that market any longer. So all this to say that the standards are pretty low, guys. The standards are pretty low. We can do better. I think that we should be doing better. When it comes down to it, these type of men are only good for the financial benefits that they bring. They are not worth the emotional trauma and turmoil that you stand to go through if you do end up in a serious relationship or actually getting married to them. And they don't want to heal. They don't want to work on themselves. Makoto, unfortunately, team, but I've seen a lot of women in my circle, and just, I mean, if you look at Balisa and Portia, they do like, you know, look within and try to work on themselves and figure out how they could have been, you know, the problem. And you can see that they have the language, you know, of healing as to like what is happening emotionally in their disagreements with their husbands. I mean, Portia has taken a complete 360 in terms of the whole Bongani is not handsome, you know, thing, and the fact that, you know, she's appreciating how he treats her. I don't know how long that's going to last, but there's a sense of, we see those characters sort of the dynamism and them really looking inward in situations like this. But I shame Tsepo. I. And I don't blame him, guys. He's been socialized like this, but the socialization definitely has to change. Maybe we are wrong about him, but the level of childishness that he displays on the show when the cameras are on, the complete lack of self-awareness and introspection. It seems like he has not done any healing or work on himself, let alone healing his physical health, guys. I mean, come on. I saw him play pedal very well, and he seemed to have a lot of stamina, but also like the drinking heavily, the going out late at night, drinking and driving. That doesn't, you know, that's not the behavior of a person who really wants to take care of himself and his health. I don't know. That's just me. He just wants to be babied and celebrated for the monetary contributions that he brings to the marriage. I mean, can you imagine how long a marriage is supposed to last? Like an entire lifetime. And we have to have this back and forth as if we don't know why we are in this marriage in the first place. Anyways, guys, let me just leave it alone. Because if I keep going, this video will be an hour long, and I don't want to do that to you. But if you liked what you heard and you know, it got you thinking a little bit more about this issue of marriage, do leave a comment down below. And if you want me maybe to address a specific topic or aspect of the topic, do let me know down below. If you enjoyed, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.